Hello and welcome everyone to episode 9 of the Casual Spikes podcast. I am your co-host Dakota, aka Crowd23. Here on YouTube, joining me as always is my co-host Randy from Modern with Randy. Randy, how's it going?
Uh, Good and bad at the same time.
The forever conundrum of like not knowing what to play in Modern, but being able to play everything in Modern.
Yeah. I mean, we're sitting here 2 days before a tournament that I have not a deck built for because
Yeah,
I'm a good Magic player.
I would say first world Magic problems. I can literally play everything, but play nothing.
Yeah. I mean, I'm close to playing just about everything in Modern.
Have you thought about just playing pre-releases all weekend?
Yeah, but that would require stores around me to do them.
I'm sure there's a pretty big tournament happening that is like the unofficial, because I guess technically it's not even officially the start of RCQ season, but technically it is at the same time.
Yeah, we're in a weird little spot.
Yeah, I think Schrodinger's cat can kind of explain like most phenomenons that happen because they simultaneously are and aren't what they are.
Yeah,
Thank God
because
this isn't a
there's
physics podcast.
well, we're both not smart enough for that.
Definitely not. I definitely, have enough ADHD to where I'm willing to explore these topics, but not enough to actually know what I'm talking about.
So both of us can't play hard to scale, so we're definitely not smart enough to talk about physics.
No, we can talk about 95% of the cardboard rectangles that we play with, and that's probably about it. It's the best we're gonna
Yeah,
get.
I understand 90 degrees and tapping. That's about it.
Thank God. Not only do we know how to properly tap our lands and our creatures when we go to combat, or use them, or literally do anything, because we're the smartest humans alive, and that'll never backfire, I'm sure.
No, there's no way that backfires. Says the player who's going to get 0-3 in his modern event tomorrow. Or not tomorrow,
Oh
but
no,
Sunday.
no. That's why you got to play just got to play the zoo deck. That's all you got to do.
I know. That's
You win
probably
at
what it
least
is.
you'll win at least one match if you play the zoo deck.
See, that's probably the deck I should play, but we're probably going to end up jamming Asmo and then realize that we got burned again for the fourth time, fifth time of playing that deck.
We figure out the food deck is not as it seems. It happens. But thankfully, Randy, if you were actually going to play Pioneer, and you were paying attention to anything that we just are going about to go over, English has been hard, man. Holy shit.
Yeah.
We're gonna be doing some RCQ prep to get ready for the unofficial official start of Pioneer RCQ season.
Yes.
And what a better way than to admit right now that the first RCQ that we plan on going to is Outlaws of Thunder Junction Limited.
Oh, yeah. Well, yeah, we're just going to spike that so that we don't have to worry about the Rakdos Vampire Scourge.
Yeah, I mean, the rest of you nerds are going to have to figure it out. That's why we're here.
Yeah.
We're going to hopefully do it some justice. There's 5 decks that we picked out that are going to be kind of the most likely ones that you are going to see, if you go to an RCQ at maybe your local game store, or if you decide to travel, any amount of distance to go to an event to try to qualify. These are the decks that you're most likely going to see, kind of what they're planning on doing, and kind of the approach you want to take if you're planning on like playing the deck or vice versa.
Yeah. I
It's
mean,
gonna,
at least 3 of these decks you'll for sure see.
yeah, and kind of even going further past that too on the docket tonight, we have kind of like prepping for those tournaments as well, because believe it or not, it might not seem like it's kind of a big deal, but definitely putting yourself in the right mindset and getting kind of into that like tournament flow to like get prepared and everything will kind of help you in the long run, where if you win the RCQ, you can end up kind of taking these tricks into the RC and possibly even like the Pro Tour and things like that.
Yeah, exactly. A lot of any tournament prep is a lot of mental and just knowing your deck and knowing what you're going to face and having a game plan for it, essentially. Um, just little things that are really obvious that you will find most Magic players fail to do, or most players fail to do a lot. So, but we'll go over all of that here after we talk about these decks and such, what you can expect to see, and what you will most likely see.
Amen. So let's without further ado, Randy, let's kind of get into it. I guess we kind of have it already planned out where we're going to be looking at some of the, the top tier decks of the format. At least 3 decks that I would place as like the being the best decks in the format, and then a few other ones that are kind of around, like have some things that have something going on that is powerful in the format, and compared to what is
Yeah.
being done.
I would say the other two are going to be the ones that have been upticking the most recently and are starting to see a good deal amount of play moving forward. And what I think you're going to see people gravitate towards moving towards like your local RCQs and stuff like that. Now, obviously, it's going to depend on like what your meta is because, right, like it's very likely to go to a 30-person RCQ and see like two Phoenix lists, no Amalia, two Rakdos mid range or Rakdos vampires, whatever you want to call it, and then like a bunch of like quote unquote tier two decks.
True. It just kind of depends on, if it's your like actual game store that you go to and, you hang out at, you can get a pretty good idea of like what the metagame's going to look like. And you're going to get a little less help necessarily from this. I mean, you'll kind of get some like good tips and tricks, things to remember and all that. But, by and large, this is like a way that you can prepare your 75, for kind of like what to expect and hopefully not lose to these decks.
Yeah, which is easier said than done. I think starting off with our first deck, it's the Rakdos Vampires, Rakdos Mid Range, Rakdos insert whatever name you're calling it this week, essentially. Um, by and large, this is mostly just a value mid range deck, essentially. It's a little lower to the ground than like what most people consider mid range because like we cap out at essentially 4 drop is our cap out. Like they're playing Vein Ripper at 6, but like we're planning to play that on turn 3, not turn 6.
Mm.
And I mean, basically, the deck just does what Rakdos has always does. It plays 4 Thoughtseize and 2 Duresses to slow down the opponent's hand, take their best card, take their removal spell, take whatever they need to put themselves in a better position. Playing 6 different 2 drops in Blood Tides Harvester and Dust Legionnaire or Dust Legion Zealot as this value creatures, and then what we're playing three.
A Preacher of the Schism and, like Shieldred the Apocalypse and everything like
Yeah.
that. Round out the
Well,
creatures.
I was trying to go more with like the 3 drop slot because like
Oh, yeah.
they're up to like 11 different 3 dot slots. We are trying to turn 1 interact with our opponent, put like either Fiddle Pushing, Thoughtseize, turn 2 play a value creature, turn 3 play a value 3 drop, and then just take over the game from that point.
Yeah, definitely as I've noticed, I think what these Rakdos decks are, at least now, because I mean, before, probably like a year ago, there was actually an argument between, playing just like the traditional mid range and playing like Sacrifice. And now we've kind of seen Rakdos mid range get pushed out in favor of like this Vampires deck. So I think what you're saying is totally right. Like, it's just kind of a deck that plays big, but then also can kind of go under what the opponent is trying to do and can win a game very quickly, or can just kind of grind it out.
Yeah, I think this is what we see here. I think is honestly the emergence because when Smuggler's Copter got unbanned, there was a huge rift in whether or not you play traditional Rakdos mid range or you play the Rakdos aggro is what was getting called because it was playing um the 2 mana 2/2 Ente
Yeah,
whatever it
NT,
is.
yeah, yeah.
Yeah, Ente and Smuggler's Copter and like if you don't know how that interaction works, you see about a billion cards a turn and you just outvalue your opponent the entire game.
Yeah, I mean, yeah,
Um,
you get to essentially like draw 3 cards a turn.
yeah, you get to draw 3 cards a turn and discard 1. It's or discard 2. It's unreal. It's just if you are digging for a removal spell, you're gonna find it. If you're digging for a value creature, you're gonna find it. If you're digging for your long lost grandmother, you're gonna find her.
Oh,
Like you are just going to
jeez.
you're going to dig through your deck. It's an unreal and it's gross. It was gross to watch. It was gross to see, and I was very annoyed with Wizards unbanning Smuggler's Copter right before uh, RC Atlanta.
This quickly became an episode of Criminal Minds.
Well, I mean, we are committing crimes with a new set, so I don't know what you want from me.
True. This deck can confirm does a pretty decent job of committing crimes.
Yes, but I think we finally reached like that perfect middle ground now, where like you have all these value low drop creatures that are also very impactful. Like you have the Dust Legionnaire that redraws itself. You have Preacher that's broken on multiple levels with its BS abilities. You have Shieldred that is ungodly good, and you have Vein Ripper that's annoying to remove and can just kill your opponent ridiculously fast.
True. Kind of a thing I noticed too, Randy. Like, I think why Vein Ripper is starting to kind of, I guess, kind of was poised to break out was if you look at some of like the top decks like in the format, like now that like Rakdos mid range has kind of been pushed out and we're like stuck with like vampires as like the best Rakdos deck. You have like
Mhm.
Amalia that can't get rid of Vein Ripper but has the creatures to sacrifice, and it's not necessarily ideal for the like Is It Phoenix deck to sacrifice some of its early creatures, even though it kind of has the answers. But I don't think it lines up that well to like kill a Vein Ripper with just one spell, thanks to Soren. So I think really what makes Vein Ripper even better than what it was before is that most of the decks that people want to play just don't have the creatures. Like they have the removal spells but not the creatures, or they have the creatures but not the right removal spells.
Yeah, I will say as someone who is planning on taking Art Like Phoenix to the RCQs this year and gonna probably just end up jamming that deck a lot. Vein Ripper is a pain to deal with. I've played against it a couple times now as the Phoenix player. There are some times where like you can easily remove it. Like there's definitely times where I'm just like, I'm gonna cast my Prankster. I'm going to Lightning Axe your Vein Ripper. I will sacrifice my Prankster. It's fine. This card already got value for me, and now it's getting more value in this sense. And like that's usually like that's like your ideal play, or like if you're gonna, or if you have to like you sacrifice like an Art like Phoenix that you're getting back the same turn. Like that's like your ideal plays is like those two. But like yeah, Vein Ripper is a pain to deal with, and a lot of your time you're kind of hoping just to go around it essentially. In the sense of like you have enough Arclight Phoenixes that you're attacking through, and it's like, all right, cool, you're gonna block the Phoenix, that's fine. I'm going to then, take an extra turn, get my Phoenix back, and just keep going through you.
Yeah, it's not. It sounds like a lot of like brute forcing on like the side of like Is It Phoenix to end up beating a Vein Ripper. Just like that card is just it's an abomination.
It's an abomination and it's not legendary, just in case anyone was curious.
Imagine just having to face down like multiple Vein Rippers. Couldn't be me.
Yeah, it's really cool when they have a flip Fable and they copy Vein Ripper and they kill a one creature and he's like, oh, I'm dead. That's cool.
Even better, even though it's the Winmore board state where they have two Flip Fables and they make like six of them on your end step, and then they untap and make six Vein Rippers.
Yeah, it's just it's bad. It's Vein Ripper's an annoying card. It's really good. It's the honestly the ward being sacrificed a creature is almost unreal on how good that is.
Oh yeah, for how simple it is and all the different cards that have like ward costs of like actually having to pay a significant amount of mana or pay life to be able to like kill these creatures, like sacrifice a creature. Crazy enough, feels like the most brutal ward.
I would gladly have Vein Ripper say ward pay 5 life instead of sacrifice a creature. I
Insanity.
think I think that would be better for 90% of decks,
Pay
which
five.
is yeah, which is wild to think about.
Oh my god. Yeah, this
Um,
deck. I mean, it's kind of the do. It's the do everything deck. It goes over the top of a lot of decks early. Can grind with 95% of the metagame in the mid to late game, and the fact that Soren itself with a bunch of these random vampires can either clear the way or just like get thrown at your opponent to deal lethal.
yeah, so like not something that's like broken or not noticeable. Like it's a face up play, but like if they go turn 3 play Vein Ripper, turn 4 just plus, they get to deal 5 points of damage by sacrificing a vampire with Vein Ripper out.
Mm-hmm.
Because they get to, do the Lightning Helix impersonation and also Vein Ripper's trigger. Like, this deck does a lot of damage kind of like not out of nowhere because it's very face up on the field, but it's out of nowhere when like you're like thinking mentally about like, okay, like worst case scenario, like they turn 3 Vein Ripper, I can like beat this, and you're just like, you can, but like you can't at the same time. Like this is just maybe a lot of damage. It's gonna add up way faster than you were mentally thinking it is.
Oh yeah. I mean, and with how efficient the deck is too, like that same turn 4, where like if they just have only a Vein Ripper in play, it's very easy for them to go like Dusk Legion Zealot, draw a card, play their second land, and then leave up like Bitter Triumph, play like a Thoughtseize, leave up Fatal Push, or something to that effect, and deal that 5 damage that you were talking about, and then get in for an additional 6 with a Vein Ripper.
Mm-hmm.
I mean,
Also, like just a notating fact, Ward is a triggered ability. So like, say you go to like kill Vein Ripper with Ward on the stack, if they just Fatal Push or like Heartless Act or insert whatever mana, like whatever 2 mana costs or less spell they're using to kill creatures, kill your only creature, your spell is now going to fizzle.
got him.
Yeah, I definitely had that happen to me at Magic Online.
Rip.
Yeah,
Oh
that
my
felt real
god.
good. We definitely didn't almost turn off our computer and just like throw it out the window.
Well, they were double upstairs, that's for sure.
Yeah, yeah.
So, Randy, from your expert opinion, because I think you probably played just probably a lot more Pioneer than I've gotten the chance to. How would you approach like kind of playing against Rakdos vampires?
Um, I think that realistically just depends on what deck you're playing. So I think like like as a like Art like Phoenix deck, like you're trying to position yourself to where you're not just going to lose to a turn 3 Vein Ripper, which is obviously like, harder to say like on the play, right? Or on like game one. It's like you don't know your opponent on Vamps game one unless like this player always plays vampires or something, weird like that. Um, but I think that once you realize that you are against vampires, you need to close the game out relatively fast or be able to have consistent answers to Vein Ripper. Like you need to be prepared for like so when they go like turn one Fatal Push, or they go turn two like Bloodtide Harvester or Dust Legionnaire or Legion Zealot. I don't know why I keep on calling it Legionnaire. Legion Zealot, like immediately, okay, like they're on vampires. You need to have a game plan mentally going into like, all right, what happens if they soar on turn three? Like you need to be able to figure out like, what you need to do to be able to beat a Vein Ripper, and then you also need to prepare for like what are you doing against like just their mid game, like their middling, like just I'm just gonna keep grinding you out plan. So I think pretty much no matter what deck you're on, if you are up against them, you kind of want to not play like fast, but like just be able to end the game in the next couple of turns. Like you should be playing towards ending the game. You're not going to really win this long, drawn out attrition war. So like Phoenix is obviously a little weird because like it can win attrition wars because you play 4 treasure crews, you have the ability to keep drawing cards with it, but like it is also just hard to beat a resolved Vein Ripper or like Vein Ripper into Shieldred type thing. Like that's a lot of cards you have to now deal with immediately, no matter what deck you are. And so it's just one of those things like you need to have a game plan of just like, do I have the removal to get rid of this, or am I just going to like brute force my way through this deck? What am I doing? What is my game plan? And like you need to figure that out fast, essentially. Like you need to start crafting your hand or your play pattern into like, okay, they played Bloodtide Harvester. I know it's vampires. I need to now think about what happens if they have Sword and Vein Ripper on 3. What does his game look like? What am I doing to beat that? Does that mean I'm gonna, play out 2 creatures this turn, so that way that I have the fodder to kill Vein Ripper? Am I going to dig for like either a Thoughtseize or like some kind of interaction to stop Storm from coming down? Like whatever your game plan is or whatever your deck is doing to stop that from happening is what you need to immediately then start to work towards.
Yeah, that's kind of what I was thinking while you were talking. Is like if you can just like best case scenario, try to keep Soren or Vein Ripper off the battlefield for as long as possible. It definitely makes it a little bit easier to kind of win the games, even though it's still kind of an uphill battle against like Preacher plus Shieldred.
Yeah, see, Preacher is still like a problematic creature. Like, I do think that like decks can answer it. It's just one of those like good. It's just a good value creature because it's a 2/4. Like the 4 toughness is like the most annoying part of Preacher,
Oh
and
yeah,
then obviously it keeps either drawing cards or making 1/1s, or both if you have tied for life total because that's somehow how that works. Um, so like the problem is like you like it's just so weird because like you have to hold up interaction for like Sword on turn 3, and then when they go the preacher is like cool, like I wasted a turn, right? I like played towards this to Zag instead of Zig type deal. So like it's like when they just slam Fable or Preacher on 3, you're like, well, I was ready for the Sword, but now I have to play like this grind game. How do I beat this grind game while also keeping the fact that like Vein Ripper could just come down at any point?
that's true. Vein Ripper from the top rope is pretty lethal.
Yeah, it comes out of nowhere and it's hard. It's hard to interact with.
And I think that's the conclusion I'm gonna say that we're gonna come to with this deck is the fact that it's super annoying to deal with. They're gonna zig when you want to, when you want them to zag, and
Hmm.
all of the threats like demand answers, and there's not possibly enough answers in any deck that can get rid of all the threats, but then also close out the game before they find another one of the threats that you just taken care of.
Yeah, so I will say against playing against Rakdos is if they ever get gummed up on mana or like are stuck on 3 4 lands, they if they can't double spell, the deck does feel very clunky. Because like I was talking earlier, they're playing 4 Fables, 4 Sorens, 3 Preachers. That's 11 different 3 mana cards or 3 casting cost spells. Like that is kind of gumming up your 3 drop spot. Like they don't have a lot of like low to the like their low to the ground stuff is the removal spells essentially. With like Fatal Push, Thought Thieves, and whatever 2 mana spell they're casting to kill
Yeah,
creatures because they play like 3 or 4 different ones. So like there is a point where like if you can like go under them or like if you were taking more game actions essentially, especially like as Arc like Phoenix, like that's what you want to take more game actions than whatever your opponent's doing. Like you want to be triple spelling every turn, essentially. Well, every turn from like turn 3 onward, you want to be triple spelling basically. And like if you were able to just continuously churn through your deck or churn through and keep deploying threats and things, it will overwhelm vampires. That is like the biggest problem I think with vampires is that they can get overwhelmed easily. Like they don't have any board wipes to come back from. Like if you put them on the back foot, they have to then figure out what they're doing. And if they're not able to double spell or they're not able to, like Soren Vein Ripper is like very powerful, but if like that's all they're gonna do, like you can still beat that. It's not impossible. It's just annoying.
yeah, just having to beat everything else that Vein Ripper kind of like backs up.
Hmm. The problem is like when they go, turn one Thoughtseize, turn 2 drop, turn 3 Fate or Soren into Vein Ripper into turn 4 playing another removal spell, another 2 drop, turn 5 playing 3 drop, 2 drop. Like just as they continuously are just like turning through and doing double spells, like that's where you get held up. But like I played against a vampire player who got stuck on 3 mana and like the game wasn't close. Like yeah, they had Soren into Vein Ripper on 3. I killed the Vein Ripper um through like 3 for 1ing myself basically as
Yeah,
Phoenix. Um and then they were never able to they didn't find their 4th mana until like 3 4 turns later. So like they had to single spell a turn and like I'm like, that's cool. I'm playing like 3 4 spells a turn while turning through my deck. Like I'm going to win this interaction.
great. So
So I
the
do,
the best strategy for this deck is to hope that it like chokes on itself,
yeah, I will say that I do think that's the biggest problem with this deck is like it not being able to double spell a lot.
which is kind of insane because I mean it plays 25 lands. I mean I know like stuff like Amalia plays like 20 between like 21 and 23 lands. So and this deck has like Fable the Mirror Breaker and Blood Tithe Harvester, Blood Tokens, Dusk Legion Zealot, what have you.
Mhm. it has a way to turn through, but like if like you have to think that like it's just the fact of like their spells do cost a little bit more. Like all their cheap stuff is interaction, not playing to the board, and that's kind of like you're out essentially. Is like if they're having to interact with your board instead of deploying more threats, it makes it harder for them to interact because like if they turn three they do whatever and then go into turn four like they can't play a 3-drop and a 2-drop. They now have to choose like, well, do I play my 3-drop that's like playing to the board or do I play my removal spell or what have you. And that's kind of like I think where you have to capitalize is you have to capitalize on those like the early turns of like turn 2 to 5 or 1 to 5 essentially is where you need to capitalize and be doing either doing more or interacting with them enough to where like they have to start playing on the back foot.
Okay, yeah, I can definitely see that.
Which is again easier to say if they go turn 3 Soren into Vein Ripper. Like that's you are now on the back foot in that sense. Like you have to interact with that. So like again, easier said than done. Um, that being said, I think that if you already have like a majority of these cards, I think that it is something that you should probably look into buying into. I know the deck is super expensive. I'm not telling anybody who like has none of this deck to go out and buy it. That's the only way you're going to ever win in Pioneer. That's not the case by any sense of the means. Like we see, multiple challenges, multiple things where, Rakdos Vampires is not just 1 through 8 of the top 8 list. Um, the deck can be beaten. It's not crazy for it to get beaten by any sense of the imagination. It's not like you just like, oh, you paired against vampires. Oh, well, I lost. There's no way to beat it. Um, I do think though that if you have a majority of this deck, or if like, especially if you were playing, Rakdos in the last RCQ season, like it is definitely worth it to pick up the Vein Rippers and the Sorens and bite the bullet and pay the money and have just essentially what is probably the top either number one or number two deck of the format as it currently sits.
Yeah, I mean, just if you just need to pick up like Soren and Vein Ripper, I mean, it's essentially the cost of like one of the higher end, minus like Phoenix, like one of the higher end Pioneer decks anyway. So I mean, just with like that much more of an investment, you have probably, I mean, at least the second best deck in the format, like in the worst case.
Yeah, and I will say that like Vein Ripper Sword is starting to see some play in Modern as well. This is not just something that you're only going to see in Pioneer. Um, Not to break away from Pioneer, but I know let's see play in some different mono black builds in Modern to some success because Vein Ripper's Ward is a real cost. It's not just pay 4 life, pay 3 life, and deal with it like, oh, okay, or discard a card. Oh, cool, card's discarded. I'll 2 for 1 myself to not deal with a 6/5. That's fine.
Yeah, I'd say I think it's 6-5 against like Scion and all the other stuff is going to be, I mean, minus the other 5 toughness thing or 5 power things. Excuse me.
Hmm.
Well, so I think Rakdos vampires can finally get hung up. It can hang out until next weekend, I guess. Take a
Yeah,
long
until
walk off a short bridge.
crimes break it away.
That's true. When we're allowed to now officially commit crimes. But I think that leads into like kind of the next thing because you were talking a lot about like coming from the Is It Phoenix side of things, and that being probably one of the other two, probably best decks, or at least top two decks of the format. So, Is It Phoenix is a deck that has been around forever. It seems like always kind of waxes and wanes in popularity, but at the end of the day, it's kind of been sitting at the top or near the top of the mountain for quite a while at this point.
Yeah.
So, for those of you that might not know what the Is a Phoenix deck does, I would be happy to oblige. You either see all four of this dumb bird that cares about you casting 3 or more instants or sorceries, uh, so on your first main phase, whatever, like on your turn, at the beginning of combat, if you cast 3 or more instants and sorcery cards this turn, return Arclight Phoenix from your graveyard to the battlefield. You see like 15 of this card or 4 of this card in your top 15, or you see none of them in your top 30, and that's the experience of playing Phoenix.
You're not wrong. For anyone who doesn't know, I guess let's go over really quick. So this deck plays Phoenix, Legislator, and Picklock Prancer has been like its poor cards. So you're never your goal is to never cast Arclight Phoenix. You want to either get it into the graveyard from discarding it through your bunch of different spells you play, or milling it through Pickleaxe Prankster, which is the newest addition to this deck that kind of like put this deck over the top. Like this is what made this deck. I want to say this is what took this deck from 1.5 tier 2 to tier 1. Um, so Pickleaxe Prankster is a 2 mana, 1 a generic, 1/3 flying Vigilance Fairy that has a adventure effect to it, where it's an instant, and you mill top 4 cards of your library, and then you can put an instant, sorcery, or fairy card from among them into your hand. So your goal is to go like turn 1, play like op, sleight of hand, consider whatever. Turn 2, pass turn, end of your opponent's turn, mill 4 cards, hit four Arclight Phoenixes, and just live the dream. That is the goal of this deck every time.
True.
Still waiting to hit for Artline Phoenix. I've hit two. And that felt amazing.
Yeah, I mean the fact that Arclight Phoenix has a relatively easy ability to trigger when, I mean, this deck in particular gets to play like 3 1 mana cantrips and then a 4 of essentially an honorary 1 mana cantrip in Treasure Cruise.
Oh yeah, Treasure Cruise broken.
Yeah, this deck is just a lean, mean machine. Kind of how Rakdos. I mean, this deck kind of has like one speed it wants to go, and that's gas pedal. I mean, we're gonna pedal to the metal, try to get back as many Phoenixes as possible. Makes it a lot harder for your opponent to try to stabilize when they're facing down 3 birds, and even if they can kill one a turn, like they have to also worry about the fact that you're going to be able to get it back multiple times over the course of a game, if it ever comes to that.
Yeah, I say the ridiculous part about this deck is like the fact that like removal spells don't work essentially because like you want to play like it works against like your legislator obviously like you don't get to recur that but like doing an Arclight Phoenix just means that I have to cast 3 more spells that I already wanted to cast again next turn to bring it back. And like if Phoenix is ever on the back foot, which like your goal is to never be on the back foot with Phoenix, but if you have a couple Phoenixes that you bring back, it's not hard to block profitably then in that case because it's a 3/2 creature, so it's going to either trade or just eat the creature that's attacking in most of the time. And then worst case scenario, you're like, all right, cool, I'm going to play opt, consider, sleight of hand, go to my combat phase. I'd like to bring my Phoenixes back. It's very cool that you attacked into me and I got to eat your creatures and then my creatures came back.
Mm. And to kind of add to that note of, just getting to use your Phoenixes, kind of like disposable creatures that you're going to be able to get back anyway, it kind of forces your opponent to where if they want to get rid of an Arclight Phoenix and, have a turn of reprieve, they have to pass their turn and do nothing to set up like 1 or 2 removal spells on a Phoenix to actually kind of get it off the board for a turn cycle,
Yeah.
which is also a place that you don't really want to be against Phoenix because, you get that turn of reprieve only to know that those creatures are going to end up coming back. So unless you're packing like Graveyard Hate in the main deck or, in the sideboarded games, doing that doesn't really, help you in any way. It just kind of delays Phoenix by like a turn.
Yeah.
So, I mean,
Um,
yeah. Yeah, go
I
ahead.
mean, the best part about this deck is that you get to turn through your deck. You are playing, 4 Consider, 4 Opt, 4 Sleight of Hand, 4 Free the Fae, which is the adventure card from Picklock Prankster, and 4 Treasure Cruise. Like, you will see, like, there's probably not a game that I played outside of, like, the weird ones where I had, like, 3 Phoenixes on turn 3 or something. Or,
Mm,
like, the unreal luck. Like where I was attacking with like 9 power on turn 3, turn 4, where I didn't go through 30 cards on my deck
yeah.
just from cycling through with my cantrips and my treasure cruise and milling over with picklock prankster and conniving with leather shredder. Like you just see so much of your deck that it is kind of unreal how much you see and like it's why you almost like you you get this ability of just feeling like you always are going to find whatever you're looking for. like, oh, am I looking for like, lightning axe, fiery impulse, or remove a creature? I'm probably going to be able to dig deep enough to find it.
Oh
Like
yeah.
I might have to take one hit from a creature, but like I'm going to dig deep enough to find it and over the course of 2 turns without too much like thought of like if I'm gonna get there or not.
I definitely don't think you're left wanting to. You have to get pretty unlucky a lot of the time to kind of miss. If you haven't seen a lightning axe and you end up looking at like 10 cards over the course of like 2 turns. I mean, statistically speaking, you're maybe not. You're pretty likely to at that point. Look at over half your deck. For 4 cards.
Yeah. It's very hard to like go into a turn that is like if we're on turn 3 or later, like you should be able to find just about any cards you want in your deck. Barring like Temporal Trespass or Galvanic Iteration because they are both one ofs. But everything else in your deck is essentially a four of. It does play a one Brazen Borrower. That's kind of a new thing that we or Art Like Phoenix decks have picked up. Is this a one of Brazen Borrower? Notably, that is a fairy, so it can get picked up off of Picklock's Prankster. But like outside of like digging for like one of those 3 cards, everything else in this deck is like a four of essentially. I guess we play 2 Spell Piercers too, but you're usually not digging for Spell Pierce. That's just kind of a card you have to play because Solar's a card.
Yeah, just have enough respect for it, but also get to kind of do the thing that you want to do as well.
Yeah, I've definitely cast Spell Pierce on my own spell more than once to bring back Art Like Phoenixes to attack with.
Yeah, this deck kind of it's kind of overwhelming. I think playing against like vampires and playing against the Phoenix decks, just solely from the fact that like Arclight Phoenix is for the most part not really caring what you have going on. I mean, it has obviously interaction in it, but by and large, it's like cantrip, cantrip, cantrip. All right, I'm set up to do this again. I'm gonna bring back 2 birds and hit you, and then basically whatever offense you can try to put up, I'm gonna be able to kind of stop that. And if you're not putting up an offense, then you're kind of like time walking yourself to partially deal with an Arclight Phoenix.
Yeah, I mean, I think the best way to defeat this deck is to trip them up in some way. So whether it's through counter spells, thought seizes, whatever you need to do to trip them up. Obviously, Graveyard Hate's the best thing for this deck. Like them not being able to bring back Arclight Phoenix is a big thing. Turning off like their treasure cruises to where they cost that 8 mana to draw 3 cards. It's a terrible card at that point. Like you're never playing that card, and you're never going to register that card in the deck in real life if you had to play 8 mana for treasure cruise every time.
Oh yeah,
Um, so like that is the biggest thing for this deck. I will say the problem is though is you cannot rely just on Graveyard Hate. So like if your game plan is just I'm gonna bring in Graveyard Hate and still be slow and dirtily, like Ledger Shredder is just gonna eat you alive. Um, Not to mention like they have sideboard cards for that. They play Young Pyromancer, so that all their um
all their
instants and
spells and stuff.
sorceries,
Yeah.
yeah, are making an army. They play Crackling Drake, which draws a card when it comes into play, and then is an X4, and its power is equal to the number of instants and sorceries in the graveyard and exile. So that's great that you played, your Rest in Peace on turn 2. Arclight Phoenix, or Crackling Drake is still a 12/4 that's going to kill you in 2 turns. So
Oh
like, it's great if you have graveyard hate, but you need to be proactive on top of that. You can't just like I'm slamming Rest in Peace, and then I'm not going to do anything important for the next 4 turns. All right, I'm going to play Ledger Shredder. I'm going to still consider. I'm going to discard a card. It's going to get a counter on it. I'm going to make a 4/6 Ledger Shredder that's just going to eat you.
that and the fact that casting an Arclight Phoenix at that point, if your opponent's not able to pressure you and kind of force you to answer what they're doing, a 4 mana 3/2 with haste is like really not a bad stat line, especially when you don't really have much going on and you're not really going to be able to keep recurring them. I mean, it's just a way to get in like that instant burst of damage, and
Mhm.
is a real threat at the end of the day.
Yeah, it's still 3 damage a turn. It's still bolting your opponent a turn at the very worst. But yeah, like I do see this a lot where people will like, oh yeah, I got my graveyard hate, packed away. I'm like, all right, well, what happens? Like, so what are you doing proactively on top of that? Oh, I'm kind of dirtling. Like you're gonna lose still. Like you're still gonna lose to Lizard Shredder beatdowns. Excuse me. Legislature beatdowns or Brazen Borrower beatdowns or Young Pyro beatdowns and their tokens, like you need to proactively have a game plan still. Like Pioneer is not this format where you can sit back and do nothing and just expect to win. Like there's a reason why the blue white deck has not been doing well recently. Like
Yeah, that's fair. Kind of note too, and something I just kind of picked up on, just kind of looking over the deck and everything. It's kind of crazy that in this deck in particular, that you can kind of answer the Young Pyromancer with some of the other sideboard cards you play, but it doesn't answer the hard hitting, like the 4/6 Ledger Shredder, because it'll eventually get there, and like the Crackling Drake. So I mean, you can't really get away with like having Brotherhood's End or like Anger of the Gods to deal with Young Pyromancer. That's great, but you still have like this 10 power flyer that's like threatening to kill you.
yeah, like I just the deck has learned that like it can play through graveyard hate. So I mean like the biggest problem with like graveyard hate, or like as a Phoenix player, like I know someone's gonna bring in like hard graveyard hate where it's just like someone's gonna exile my graveyard or like all my cards are gonna be exiled. Is the worst thing I have to do is figure out how many treasure cruises I want to trim in those matchups because like that's like the worst card. But this deck is still just great because like let's say I trim no treasure cruises because I didn't think my opponent's gonna have like hard graveyard hate and they turn zero ley line of the void. And I go, oh, I got like a treasure cruise in my hand. Like, oh, well, that sucks. I still just have Ledger Shredder. I'm going to discard this too, put a counter on my Ledger Shredder, and it's still going to be just a beat down creature now.
Mm.
Like, I'm still going to get value from this treasure cruise because it's a dead card in my hand.
I mean,
It's kind of unreal how good this deck is.
yeah, just a game what's the word I want to use, like a living end kind of like game plan in game one where it's very streamlined. Like we're gonna do our thing, and 95% of the decks in the format aren't going to be able to like stop it, because
Hmm.
like Graveyard Hay would like technically be at its best in like game one, and then where you can kind of diversify in like game two and game three. But even in that case, like I was saying, if you have Anger of the Gods, Brotherhood's End, like sure you answer half the threats and you still have to worry about the other half, and if you have single targeted removal to get rid of like the big ledger shredders and like the big crackling drakes, there's still the chance that you die to a legion of 1/1s too. So just kind of a lose-lose situation if your cards don't line up right against this deck, especially in the sideboard games where it has all those tools and options to offset the fact that you could just play Rest in Peace and shut off like the main component of the deck.
Yeah, and then you just lose to, a young Pyromancer or just Ledger Shredder beatdowns or whatever. Like, just like I said, it's just that problem where like it's a graveyard based deck, but like if you turn off the graveyard, the deck is still just going to turn through its deck and find what it's looking for. Like I said, so like worst case scenario, like they go turn one, Leyline of the Void and Treasure Cruise is dead in my hand. I still have Consider, Sleight of Hand, Opt. I have Free the Fae. Like I have all these cards to now dig for what I need to find to get back into the game. And it's crazy that like it's just that good where like you're like okay, yeah, that's cool, like you turned off like my brazen, you turned off my art like Phoenix coming back, and you turned off my treasure cruise. I'm just gonna dig and still find like my now beatdown creatures, and I'm gonna win this game through beatdowns from my not recursive threats.
Yeah, this deck is just, it's nuts. Like this deck is very powerful, kind of deserving, like I said, of that top two spot in the format.
Yeah, there's a reason why this is a large percentage of the meta. um it definitely is one of those decks that like rewards you for knowing your deck and knowing what you're playing against as well. Is in like you have all this card selection essentially to figure out what you need and when you need it, and that's like what you get rewarded with playing Phoenix. Obviously, like there are some like zero thought process games where like you mill over three Phoenix in the top like 10 cards, and you're just like, oh cool, Phoenix go burr, like. congratulations. Like anybody who's played Magic can understand how to win this game. But there's also, the games where you don't see, one, or you don't see even one Arclight Phoenix, and you have to figure out how am I playing out this game to maximize all the value I can get to still beat my opponent.
Oh, fair enough. So yeah, I mean I think that's pretty good for. I think that's pretty good for Phoenix. That kind of sums up kind of like the experience of playing against like two of the best decks to probably be in Pioneer in like the last year. I would think.
Yeah, they're just very consistent, resilient, and they put a clock on you.
So I know that in other videos where I've kind of ranked some of the top tier decks of the Pioneer format, I actually have this deck as like the kind of like a dark horse to be like the best deck because I think it has a little bit of like everything to kind of do what it needs to do to like not only beat the top decks but kind of like the other decks that are kind of poised to go over the top of those other two. And I honestly truly mean it when I talk about like Amalia combo being kind of that third deck that's kind of in a weird place where I think it has the right tools to do it. I just think that I think the other two decks might be a little bit too consistent, and like they have those draws where you can kind of blow Amalia out of the water, but at the same time, like Amalia could just kill you if you just stumble for even a turn.
Yeah, I will say I think Amaya is in the same place that Yawgmoth was like 2 years ago in Modern.
Yeah, just kind of a deck that had a lot of the right things going on. It just maybe didn't have, was missing a little something, plus a little bit of experimentation going on to where it's like right there, but you just need that little something. You need that star player in there to kind of boost the ship.
Mhm. I will say I think Amalia is a very interesting deck. I think it has a lot of good things going for it. I think that people are starting to realize how to build the deck correctly. I know when we went, or I guess not when I went to RC Atlanta, I had this deck that I could have played for the tournament, but I thought that no one had a good list out, and obviously I had not had enough time to sit there and practice and play this deck out because like the deck was I think 2 weeks old at that point, so people were still wildly trying to figure out what they thought was the best thing. Are we playing 20 lands? Are we playing 25 lands? How many creatures are we playing? What are we doing with this? What are we doing with that? Are we playing all four return to the ranks? Like there was just so many questions that were not answered yet. And
Yeah,
so I optimally decided not to play it, despite picking up a lot of cards for the deck just to be on the safe side. Because I was like, if someone blows this out of the water in 2 weeks, I will take it just off the principle of I think it's a very good deck. Um, I still think it's a very good deck, but I do think it just needs more innovating, and I could definitely see coming here RC, DC like this deck taking down the entire RC because someone found the right 75 to play.
yeah. I mean, we talk about turn three Vein Ripper from like Rakdos, and getting back like two or three Arclight Phoenix from the Is It Phoenix deck, and like theoretically, that like ends the game the majority of the time. Where like Amalia combo just can actual factual just send you to the sideboarded games, on turn three, just out of nowhere,
Hmm.
with a few different setups as well to kind of enact the combo of getting Amalia in play with a Wild Growth Walker, just being able to explore infinitely until Amalia reaches 20 power. She's gonna blow up the board, and more than likely, unless you're playing like the mirror, in some cases, your opponent's not gonna have more life than your Amalia has power, so you're gonna be able to just one shot them with it on turn three.
Yeah.
And just strictly knowing that that's even a possibility coming from the deck punishes you so hard if you end up having to mulligan down to like 5 cards and you have to kind of keep a hand that lets you play the game but doesn't really line up profitably with what they have going on. Or if you stumble on lands, maybe you have a cantrip heavy hand, whatever it is, if you don't find what you're looking for right away, this deck can just kind of kill you, like actually kill you out of nowhere.
Yeah, it is. Jesus, it is very powerful. It's very good, and um, I will say, like as a Phoenix player, I played against this deck a couple times. Like you can win the games where um they go off with Amalia. Like it's possible to win those games, but like you have to have a good setup. And I know you and I had practiced that matchup a couple times, and like you had gone off and I had won, but it was very touch and go of me being able to like essentially mill out my opponent because he had to go through so many cards and such, and I had the way to stop like the Ace of Flux Reservoir, which most of the decks are playing now, as a way of like, okay, well they enter my Amalia, I'm still at like 150 life. I'm gonna cast Ace of Flux Reservoir. If you don't have an answer to this, I'm going to deal 50 damage to you.
Yeah, and to your point, when you were talking about the RC Atlanta for this event, like nobody was playing Aether Flux Reservoir. It was very much just a we're gonna put a ton of things into play combo, and then we're gonna find a return to the ranks, and then if our opponent answers this, we're gonna bring everything back and reestablish. And thanks to cards like Aether Flux Reservoir and Dina Soul Steeper, you have these ways of just winning the game without having to actually go through combat as well, and get that kind of incremental value and some neat tricks that like these creature combo decks have always had for since the beginning of time. And this deck is definitely no exception, and it feels super satisfying when you get to play it and you kind of play it the quote unquote right way of just sequencing your things right, and of course setting up like the combo from seemingly no board state as well.
Yeah, it's it's almost crazy what this deck can do. Like I said, this deck feels a lot like Yawgmoth does in Modern, where I think right now people are still heavily focused on the combo side of it, and maybe that's how it will always be. This deck will always be combo centric, focused. But it also just feels like we're just a few, like maybe a few cards away, maybe just tweaking some numbers away, maybe just insert whatever you think is the right thing to do away from where this deck is just going to be very consistent and very dominant. It's already close to that point. Like I think this deck is so close to just being there that I am not going to be surprised if this RCQ season someone breaks Amalia.
Yeah, and I mean, if I've been in like the Discord, I've been looking at other people's deck lists and kind of what they've been experimenting with, and when I tell you that like there's a bunch of different just flex cards that they're all playing, because obviously the core of the deck is pretty much like locked in, minus like one Lunarch veteran, but like everything else, like you'll see like routinely 7 to 10 creatures in this deck, plus like the sideboard slots like change, and then the number of like Return to the Ranks, Court of Calling, Collected Company, whatever number is correct, change as well. So I mean, this deck is very dynamic, in how people want to build it, and who knows, we might not even still find it, if we're already that far off from the builds that we have now. Who knows if we'll actually find like the de facto right build for this deck.
Oh yeah, I'm not saying it's going to be guaranteed by any means, but I do think that we are. I would not be surprised if somebody who is smarter than me sits down and figures out like this is the quote unquote like 55 that you want to play in locked in, and like you have five kind of slot like flex slots depending on, do you think you're going to see more Arclight Phoenix, do you think you're going to see more Rakdos Vampires, do you think you're going to see more like blue white control, insert whatever deck you think you're going to run into more of, and those are like your five flex slots in the side or in the main deck, and then you have like your sideboard built to then be what you think you're going to see.
Yeah. I guess that was kind of like more of like a testament to just how I guess maybe to the format itself, where you just have like this deck that I mean, it has like this combo. I mean, that's kind of all it needs, and you're just trying to figure out like the supporting cast, like what's going to kind of raise the entire tide of the ship to sail off into victory. And
Mhm.
It just seems like it kind of changes. We see like one ofs and two ofs change, and you don't see it like too much. Like even Yawgmoth nowadays, there's like one or two slots in the main that shift from time to time, and then a few cards in the sideboard, and that's it. Where Amalia just seems like there's always a different sideboard for each deck. There's a different 5-10 creatures on the main board and everything. It's kind of amazing, honestly, and the fact that the deck still continues to find success even with kind of like the different variations and varieties and stuff that we see is maybe a testament to like how powerful just being able to nullify all the other aggro strategies and kill your opponent on turn 3 if they even blink can actually be.
Yeah, I mean, it's a great deck. I like it. And I think much the way you have to say about it is it's just interesting seeing that like, every week you see the deck do well. It's not the same as the deck that did good the previous week. Like there's always probably at least 10 to 15 cards different between the main deck and the sideboard.
You want to know a number that's bigger than 15, Randy?
Sure.
80.
I, yeah, I don't think Amalia is playing 80 cards though.
No, but you know what is playing 80 cards?
Bad decks.
No, no. So you know what? Nivtalite is a deck that kind of like around that time. I might have even said something to you before, where in a world where like vampires is kind of like this big meanie and everything. I would think that Nivtalite would be a little bit better, just because typically in like the mid range matchups, like whoever has like the bigger spells, who goes over the top more, ends up kind of coming out ahead. And I thought
Mhm.
that this deck might at least be in a relatively decent position, given the fact that it definitely is the definition of like I am going well over the top of what my opponent's going to be doing.
Yeah, I say you're not wrong in that sense by any means. This definitely is the go over the top deck. I say Nib Visit, um, Nib Visit Reborn, or Five Color Control, or Five Color Bring to Light, whatever you want to call this deck, has been around for a couple of years now, and has waxed and waned in popularity. And um,
Hey, that's my line. Stole my whole
but
style.
your whole style describing a deck that waxes and wanes.
Yeah, it's kind of like the moon, except you're allowed to stare at this one. In fact, it's probably encouraged.
I'd say the biggest thing this deck has gotten over the last few years is it's got Lightning Helix as a good early removal spell and life gain, and it's gotten up the beanstalk to just draw more cards than ever before.
True that. This deck
But
is nuts.
it is. Ironically, though, I think it's funny is they've gone down from what used to be a four of in the deck all the time, which was Nimbus Reborn. In case anyone doesn't know what this card actually does, it's five mana, all the colors, 6/6 flyer, and then when it enters the battlefield, you get to reveal the top 10 cards of your library, and then for each color pair, you choose a card that's exactly those colors from among them, and put the chosen cards into your hand, and the rest of the bottom of your library in random order. So basically, all the two color pairs. So you have the Azorius, Rakdos, Gruul, and the rest of them.
You get the
Uh,
picture.
yeah, I'm not going through all 10. So obviously the deck plays a bunch of then two mana, or not two mana, but two colored spells, right? So you have, Bring to Light, which is blue green and three other, definitely Aquarion, as a removal spell for red white, Tobin's Veto, Kolaghan's Command, Lightning Helix, Unmoored Ego, Vanishing Verse, are like kind of your big hits, and Wandering Mind is another big one.
Yeah, I mean, I guess not even relatively new, because I don't think the vampire set, what Midnight Hunt, is that new of a, or that, yeah, that new of a set.
No, it's really not. It feels like it's still new, but it's like 12 sets ago.
Yeah, it's 2021. My God, you remember that time?
No, that was COVID time. That's not real time.
That didn't actually happen.
It didn't actually.
Straight,
Um,
straight to Pioneer printed cards.
yeah. But the deck is essentially designed to just go over top of your opponent, right? Like you're playing 80 cards to fit in all these powerful spells. You're playing Fable, you're playing Leyline. Excuse me, Leyline Binding up the Beanstalk to get more draw, Sylvan Carrier to help ramp a little bit, Dim Visit Reborn, Omnath because that card still is legal in all formats. Um,
True,
and
true.
all these things, this kind of stabilizes go big and above whatever your opponent is thinking of doing. So obviously this deck fails to like low to the ground creature decks is definitely something it loses to. I feel like this deck does not do well against a Malia combo. I think that it can break up the combo to some degree because like you are playing, removal spells. It's not like it's playing nothing, but like all it takes is a Malia going off one time, and it's going to be able to hopefully just reveal until it finds um, Aetherflux Reservoir and then just win from either Aetherflux Reservoir or attacking with a 23 power creature.
Yeah. I will.
So I do.
Oh, go
Oh, go
ahead.
ahead.
No, after you, sir. I'm sorry for interrupting you.
No, you're good. I will say, I'm not sure how this matchup is against Arclight Phoenix because it has enough early interaction, but I feel like Arclight Phoenix could probably go around it or go through it, depending on how early they find Omnath and things like that, and the removal spells line up against or for Arclight Phoenix and such. They do have the 4 Vanishing Verse, which is good against Arclight Phoenix because it exiles a monocolored permanent. So exiling Phoenixes is the best way to answer Phoenix. Um, I think this deck definitely dumpsters on Rakdos Vampires. That's probably the number one reason to play this deck.
Yeah, I would say so. I mean, yeah, yeah. This deck, man. The only thing that is upsetting about the Niv Delight deck is that it went away from its roots of using Bring Delight to find different double face cards to kind of like cheat the other side. Because
Yeah,
it's only playing Valky to do that, and that's it.
that is the sad part. But I think it realized that it finally just has enough good spells now that it doesn't need to do that.
True, and even this deck has some like weird cards. Not on the list that I'm looking at currently, but there's like a card that lets you, I think, destroy all creatures and then collect evidence 6, and then you can like essentially surgical, like a destroy
Yeah,
card.
yeah, the blackboard wipe. I know what you're talking about.
Yeah, yeah.
I don't
So
know what it's called.
yeah, I can't remember, but I'm pretty sure like you can find it off like Bring to Light and just
Hmm.
and do crazy things. Like that's kind of like the main thing about this deck. It almost feels like the I guess it doesn't really feel like much of anything. Just kind of how the Up the Beanstalk decks like felt, but this is just gonna be casting your spells kind of fairly and then getting multiple triggers thanks to Bring to Light actually casting the spell that you get.
Yeah, that is kind of like the broken thing with Up the Beanstalk. Like, you get to Bring to Light, cast Bring to Light. I'm gonna draw a card from Up the Beanstalk. I'm gonna get my 5 mana spell. I'm gonna draw a card from Up the Beanstalk. So like, I just I went positive. I got 2 cards out of my hands last deck, and also drew 2 cards. So like, I just stayed even. Like, I didn't lose any card value.
Yeah. Also, another note too. At least this list in particular that I'm looking at doesn't have a Elish Norn, which I know was kind of a card that they had been playing for a while.
Yeah, the list I'm looking at doesn't have an Ellis Norn either. Which I mean, New Visit Reborn is also one of those decks where like, it's kind of like Amalia, where you can play probably hundreds of different cards, to be
Oh yeah.
completely honest. I have to imagine probably Vanishing Verse is probably one of the cards, like besides Bring to Light, the Misery Reborn, Omnath, and like Fable, Leyline, Off the Beanstalk, probably every number is probably something you can change.
Yeah,
Like,
yeah.
you're going to play 4 Up the Beanstalk because it lets you draw and get value. Fable is just a great card. Leyline Bindings is a great card. You're already 5 colors. Omnath is a great card, and Visit's basically the reason why you're playing the deck.
Yeah, yeah.
Same with Bring to Light. So like outside of those, like everything, I have to imagine all these numbers are up for grabs, and I'm sure even Dim Visit apparently looks like it's up for grab in numbers because this one's only running 2, and I remember when this deck used to run 4 guaranteed.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, I don't know. I don't really know what else to say. Kind of like about this deck. It's like a big giant mess, and when they cast Bring to Light, you're basically just kind of like rolling up your sleeves and waiting to see what they kind of come up with. Because more often than not, it's either going to lead to them having a bunch of cards in their hand or absolutely decimating your board and leave you with like very minimal ways of clawing back into the game.
Yeah, it's a good deck. I think that if you are going into a meta game that you know is plagued by Rakdos vampires, like you plan to see a bunch of Rakdos vampires, you plan to see a bunch of like blue white control, just like these mid range decks, you want to take this because you're going to eat them all day. You're gonna feel you're just gonna feel like a giant five head person where you're just like you're gonna walk in and feel like the smartest person in the room as you're just crushing Rakdos mid range, Rakdos vampires, whatever you want to call it. And he's like, "Yeah, man, that's great that you did that. I'm gonna bring to light. I'm gonna get Nymph Visit. I'm gonna draw 10. I'm gonna draw 5 cards that I get to pick out of the top 10 of my deck. I have all this value. Good luck."
True. Um, well, all right. So whatever. Nim is it. Get out of here. Deck tech coming on Monday for that deck too, because I want to have an excuse to like play it.
Good luck.
Um, we have one more deck, and this is kind of a pick that Randy had, and the more I kind of look at it, the more I kind of like having it here, for multiple reasons. So I'll let you take it away, Randy.
Gotcha. So this is the like Ensoul artifact deck. It's been around for quite a long time. It got a giant upgrade with Smuggler's Copter, and then Entei came in, did another good upgrade. Basically, all you're trying to do is cast Ensoul Artifact, which is an enchantment aura. It's a blue and a generic. Enchanted Artifact is a creature with base power, toughness 5/5, in addition to its other types. So with that, we have Voldarian Epicure that makes a blood token that we can turn into. We have Spygrass Siren that we can play on turn 1 for a map token that we can make into a 5/5. Uh, we have Gleaming Geardrake, which is the newest addition to this deck, which is red and a blue flying. When it enters the battlefield, you investigate, and then whenever you sacrifice an artifact, put a +1/+1 counter on it. It is a 1/1. And then we also are playing 4 Darksteel Citadel, which is artifact land, is indestructible. And I think that's all we have for artifact. Smoke Ghost Copter is an artifact, and yeah, Case of the Flitched Falcon. It's a new case enchantment. So when it enters the battlefield, you investigate, so you make a clue, and then if you control 3 more artifacts, it becomes solved. And as long as this is solved, you can sacrifice it and put 4 +1/+1 counters on target non-creature artifact. It becomes a 0/0 bird with flying in addition to its other types.
Wow.
So the whole deck is designed around playing cheap creatures to either crew Smuggler's Copter to make token or to make artifacts for either case or its soul artifact, and then you're playing Shrapnel Blast, which is an instant red and a generic. Additional cost to sacrifice it, or sorry, additional cost to play Shrapnel Blast is to sacrifice an artifact and it deals 5 damage to any target. Um, Along with like some Spell Pierce, Metallic Reboot, and Torch the Towers as another just like creature removal spell. And your game plan is just to go under whatever you're playing.
Yeah, I mean this is like hardcore, just setting up for like turn 2 in Soul, start hitting your opponent for 5, and then just all the reach in the world with Shrapnel Blast.
Yeah, the deck does a lot of damage. It's honestly a great pick, I think. Going into the RCQ season, like if you are, especially like this is a great budget deck as well. So like I mean, most of the money in this deck comes in the case of Smuggler's Copter and your land base. And with Spider Bluff Canals getting reprinted, you know they're going to be super cheap. So like you have basically Otawara is going to be expensive, Steam Vents is going to be expensive, and Smuggler's Copter is going to be expensive, and then everything else in this deck is like $5 or less.
True. I mean, once you get those money cards, the Steam Vents, Steam Vents, the Smuggler's Copter, and that like that's the majority of the price of the deck. The rest is like about
And
$100.
yeah, and all those cards are playable in other decks. Like Smuggler's Hopper is going to be it's in Pioneer. It's not like the best card right now, but it's not going to be bad. Like that card's going to continuously see play. Uh, Steam Vent, Spider Bluff Canal, the lands are not going to be a bad investment. They're never going to be like, oh man, I can't believe I own these lands. No one's ever said that in Magic history. No one's upset that they own lands.
The only people that are upset about owning lands are the people that just started playing.
Yeah,
We want prime
land
times, not Steam Vents.
lands are always a good investment in Magic as a whole.
And you're basically like most of the way to building is it Phoenix at some point too.
Yeah,
So that's something.
but I do think this is a great deck to take to the RCQs. I think that if you want to go under your opponent, you want to just win fast. This is definitely the deck to do it. Um, Making 5/5s on turn two is a challenge for most decks to beat. Like Rakdos mid range has Fatal Push as like their answer, but like Amalia doesn't have an answer to that. Arclight Phoenix doesn't have a good answer to a 5/5 creature on turn two, and Visit Reborn doesn't have a good answer to a 5/5 on turn two. That like all these decks don't have good answers, and then if you turn two, like even if you go turn two, um, make your Dark Seal Citadel into a 5/5, that's a 5/5 indestructible creature.
Ain't
Let me
nothing.
know what deck in this format is consistently dealing with that.
I can answer that question. It's roughly zero.
Yeah, like it's good. Like that is just a creature that's getting chump blocked every turn, and then if you have Entity going, you're giving it trample and putting a counter on it, and now it's a 6/6 trampler and a 7/7 trampler indestructible.
It's absolutely disgusting.
Answer me. It's what it says.
True. Yeah, I mean this deck just pumps out so much damage, and unlike Amalia, where it's going to end the game on turn three, this deck is going to basically have your opponent at like one or two, without them doing anything. First off, so if they shock, a shock land into play, they could just be dead on turn three.
Yeah. Like you are just gonna put out a lot of damage quickly, and then like let's say they were able to stabilize. Like you are just, top decking one shrapnel blast away from just like, oh, I'm gonna 5 you.
Oh yeah.
What's your life roll again? 5?
You
I
know,
like to win the game.
I thought of a T-shirt where you could just have like the art of shrapnel blasts, like you talk a lot of shit for someone in shrapnel blast range.
Yeah.
I'm just saying, 2025, because I don't know how T-shirts work in 2024. I know you wear them, but that's about it.
That's fair. Um, but yeah, these are pretty much like the 5 decks that we think um you can expect to see coming into the RCQ season. Obviously, uh Rakdos Vampires are like Phoenix, Amalia. These are known decks. If you don't know this deck is coming, like, if you don't know what that deck is, learn it. Um, Learn how it works. I implore anybody who is confused on how the deck works or maybe doesn't understand how strong the decks are. Um, Either proxy it up with like your friends and play tests like that. If you have like any kind of like mana traders or any kind of like account like that, I implore you to rent it and test out the deck just so you can get an understanding of how that deck works. Like any deck that you're curious about and don't really understand, I implore anyone who can either proxy it or play it, or like rent it or whatever you can to play it and just to understand what it does. If you understand what a deck does, you can learn its weaknesses so much easier and kind of understand how you can exploit those with whatever deck you are playing. Because obviously, we don't all have, hundreds of dollars to throw at Magic and just like, oh, I'm going to build this deck this time. Like, economy sucks. People aren't on like just, I'm going to build whatever I want type money. So, if you've, if a Soul Artifact is a deck that like, you have the lands for already, you can build this for relatively cheap. do that, this deck is not gonna like you're not gonna be laughed out of the tournament because you showed up with insult artifact deck. Like there's a very real chance that you just take it down.
Yeah, and kind of the big thing too, going into kind of like the RCQ season and stuff. Obviously, you have a lot better of a chance of qualifying for a tournament if you play in more of them. Just because Magic is a game of variance, like you're not gonna always have like the best of luck. Sometimes your opponent is just going to be the protagonist of that particular day, and you just need to be able to accept it, but then also, not be discouraged if that happens, and just to kind of continue to kind of keep punching away and, just getting better at playing your deck, hoping that the luck kind of breaks your way a little bit more and that you're properly prepared that when that scenario comes up, you're losing games to things that are out of your control rather than losing because you made an incorrect play.
Correct. And yeah, I mean you gotta be prepared to lose and lose often. I have lost hundreds of games, probably thousands of games, honestly. Thousands of matches. Uh, I have definitely walked into a tournament where I had quote unquote the best deck going into the tournament and did not do well that day. It is not crazy. Um, the biggest thing I always like to tell people is that remember after round one of every tournament, half of the people in that room are now undefeated and the other half of the people have not won a match. It does not mean that the half of the people who lost are bad at Magic. It doesn't mean the people who won are the best players in the room.
Somebody had to win and someone's got to lose,
Yeah, it's
preferably.
yeah. Preferably you want to win. Obviously, like don't get me wrong. Like no one goes into a tournament and go, "Ah, oh, glad I lost." No one's happy about that. But you got to remember that like you got to take each match individually. Like this is probably one of the biggest and hardest things I think to learn with competitive Magic, right? Because like everyone is there to win. Like everyone paid an entry fee of whatever the price is. People are there to win. People are there to qualify. People are there to do whatever they're there for. But they paid a price to get into this tournament. They want to do well. No one goes into a tournament that they're paying, 25 plus dollars at and going, I sure hope I go 0-3 drop.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely don't want to say that. So I mean, it's just something to kind of like, I don't want to say temper expectations, but definitely, have some confidence going into it, but definitely don't be discouraged from going back and trying again, if things don't go your way, and who knows, maybe, you just miss out on top eight, or maybe you lose the quarterfinals, whatever it is, like that's still kind of enough motivation that like, okay, maybe next weekend, a few weekends from now, whatever, you kind of just like regroup and you go and tackle another tournament, and you learn from maybe some of those mistakes you made in the previous one, and just overall try to play better and be happy with how you played.
I implore anybody who is going to tournaments to use something like this. Let me make sure. Okay, something like this. It's a little binding notebook. It is great for keeping track of life totals, writing down any notes, and then especially if this is like your first tournament, or maybe this is a tournament that you're playing a deck that you're not used to playing, or you picked up Phoenix and you put in some hours into it or some games into it, and you kind of like, I understand the deck, I understand the position. Take notes. Do not be afraid to write down notes of what happened, what you did, what you thought you did wrong in that round, or even if you won or lost. Do not be afraid to take notes. I think this is a big thing Magic players don't do. Is Magic players love to like grind out games after games, but they won't ever like take the time to like either think about what they're doing or figure out why they lost, or like oh, I lost the variance because I did mill over 3 Arclight Phoenix in my first free the face. I'm just bad luck. Like that's not why you lost. That's just a variance of what's going to happen. You're not going to mill over 3 Phoenixes every time. Just as an example. But like you need to be able to figure out why you lost or why you won or like what you did. And I think taking notes is probably the biggest thing you can do. And if you're ever playtesting with someone, like playtest with people who are at least on your skill level or better, which I know can be easier said than done depending on what kind of LCS you have, what kind of friends you have, what kind of group you have to play with, all that. Like luckily I have Dakota, who I think is a good Magic player. I think he is very analytical when he needs to be. He plays decks analytically. He understands what he's supposed to be doing, what he's not supposed to be doing. Whether or not he always thinks the rugby play is another story. We won't talk about that. Um,
That's true. That is very true.
but we play tested Phoenix versus Amalia, and like I got to learn a lot of things because I kind of figured that was kind of a bad matchup for Phoenix, and I won a lot more games than I thought I would after playing it. And we were able to talk as we're playing and go, oh, this is what I have, this is what I don't have, and kind of like figure out like you need to have a good either playtest partner or partners who you can talk through and like treat every game like it's a real game, but at the same time, like, don't be afraid to pause the game and talk to your opponent. Like, hey, you know, I'm thinking about doing like these couple of different lines. What do you think about this? Or like after the game, like recreate that situation and go, hey, I thought about bolting this. Would that have hindered you more if I had done that, or was it better to do what I did, where I held up counterspell magic, or whatever you're doing, whatever your deck is, vice versa, when you're playing against. But you need to be able to play test and know your deck. Anytime you want to go to a tournament, you want to know what you're playing. Now, obviously, after you play Magic so long, there does get to a point where like you can kind of transfer your gears of playing Magic. Like right now, I'm getting ready to go to a Modern tournament here in the next couple of days, and I'm not sure what deck I'm taking. And I'm going to be taking a deck that I haven't put a lot of hours or practice into. But I also think that with my knowledge of playing for the last 15 years, holy crap.
Old man.
God, I feel old. Playing Magic for the last 15 years and playing competitive Magic for like the last 10 years and years of just learning and interactions and things like that I can pick up any of the like 3 decks I want to take and play them pretty optimally. Do I think I'm going to play perfectly? No, I don't think I play perfectly any tournament I go to. I don't think I've ever played perfectly at any tournament I've ever went to. I think that's not impossible, but I think it's as close to impossible as you can get. I think I can play as optimally as I can, and I think that's what I can do with just my background and skill set. But like, if you are just getting into tournament Magic or you're just getting into going to RCQs, find a deck that you want to play and then learn that deck. Make sure you're talking to other players about it. Join the millions of different discourses out there, discords out there for whatever deck you're playing. Talk to like-minded people. Talk to people who are playing the deck. Do not be afraid to expand your horizon and definitely think about like look at deck lists and figure out like especially like go to MCG Top 8 or MCG Goldfist. Look at the decks that are winning and go, I'm not playing this card. Why am I not playing this card? Well, is it because I think I found something better? Maybe you did. Like obviously, Magic is not it's not always people always have the best cards. They don't always figure out what the best card is to play in a deck, and you see it with Amalia for sure. Amalia's every deck that top 8s or better is always playing 10 to 15 cards different than the one that did it last week. So clearly someone is figuring out, oh well, this card's better than this, or maybe it's not. Maybe they got lucky. Maybe something else happened. Who knows? But don't be afraid to expand your horizon and like play test and learn what your deck does. And like I said, if you don't know how Rakdos vampires work, either proxy it up so you can play against friends and you can figure out, oh, okay, this is what they're doing. This is what their game plan is turns 1 through 4. I now know this, so now when I pick up my Phoenix deck, I know how to beat that deck.
Yeah. What Randy said, all of it, every single one.
I went out a little bit of a tangent, so I apologize, but like it is one of those things where I just think that like I know we have a lot of players who we've kind of had what is this year 3 of RCQs now or year 2 of RCQs?
Something like that, yeah. Probably like year 2, 3.
Yeah,
3.
yeah, year 2, year 3. So we're getting a lot more players, I think, who are now joining into the RCQ circuit, kind of learning that they're not like they're here to stay. Like this is what's going to happen. And I think that if you are new into getting into tournament Magic, new to getting into RCQs, or even if you've played in tournament Magic before, like it's never too late to learn new tactics, new things that help you retain your information. And I think that's a big part of what you need to do. And like Dakota said, like you have to be not afraid to like go bomb a tournament. Like it's gonna happen. You can talk to some of the best Magic players in the world. LSV, Reed Duke, all these players have gone to tournaments and bombed. They do not win every tournament they enter, obviously. Um, you know, and they've lost to better players and quote worse players than them at the same time. Like Magic is a game of variance. It's not cut and dry. If it was, then Arthritic Phoenix would always win every tournament, or Rakdos Vampires would always win every tournament. If it was cut and dry like that. But there is variance and skill level to this game.
Yeah, and like what Randy was saying, Randy said what I said. That's kind of a fun thing to like think about. Really, just kind of using the best resources or like using what resources you have available to you. I mean, every day like people are uploading like hundreds of hours of like Magic content on either specific decks or just like the format as a whole. And if you're not able to adequately get out and like play test, certain decks or even like your own deck, while I think it is way more beneficial for you to physically do the thing rather than watch someone do it. There's plenty of pioneer streamers, modern streamers, standard, what have you, that are going to be playing decks that, are meta decks or maybe off the beaten path, whatever, and it's going to get you kind of like to simulate that experience, kind of think of like what they're going to do next. What play would you make if you were in their position? And a lot of them too, they end up talking out kind of the thought process as well, and just kind of picking up on that can kind of help you to change up how you think about things and how you maybe would typically do something, and you kind of have like that level up moment as a Magic player where you're like, I think I just got a little bit better, and it'll definitely translate to when you play physical games, at an RCQ or even FNM or anything like that.
Yeah, I mean, if you can't play the games, you can't grind out the games. I mean, you have a life, right? You have work, you have maybe a family, you have friends, like you have other things. Like you can't just you aren't getting paid to play Magic, so like you can't dedicate 24 hours a day to Magic. I completely understand that. Or like you're going through different struggles or things in your life. Like no one's telling you that you need to, grind thousands of hours with your deck before you can go to a tournament. No one is suggesting that. No one's saying that. Is that the ideal situation? Absolutely. But I do think that you should do a combination of that. I think that you should play your deck as much as you can to get testing it, and then I think you should also watch people who are better than you. And I mean that in the perfect sense. Like, if you watch Reed Duke, he's going to make plays that you did not you weren't thinking about. I can guarantee it. If you watch, even Aspiring Spike, Doomblade, any of these people who have like shown that they are good at Magic, or they see out more lines than you normally think of. Think of any big name Magic player that you want. Like watch anybody who consistently streams or consistently plays Magic, they're going to be a little bit more knowledgeable than you just because they play more Magic than you, if nothing else. Um, and you'll see a lot of things that you just wouldn't think of normally. I know there's been multiple times where I've watched people who I know are better than me, and they'll go and do, oh, we're going to do this line. And I was like, that seems dumb. Why would you do that? And then two turns later, you're like, oh, yeah, because they did A, now C is happening, and they're in a better position than if I would have done B and been in a worse position.
Yeah,
And
and that's kind of like reaching those kind of level up moments where it's just kind of seeing past like maybe the immediate benefit or the immediate kind of like aftermath of like doing something, and it just kind of I mean, there's like a million and one different like Magic theories that we could go over, and from individual decks to formats to just in general lines of thinking, right? So I mean, it's all about using your time effectively that you have, or if you want to be serious, you want to go out and like crush an event or whatever, this is some of the stuff that you have to do to have the best chance at succeeding, when the just right amount of luck kind of lines up for you and the deck runs just good enough to where like it's not going to matter who's in front of you, you're going to end up playing and feeling like you're the best player in the room.
exactly.
So I mean, that's yeah.
Yeah. I mean, that's definitely one of the tips we can give you for preparing for any kind of tournament that you want to go to. And obviously, it's all different depending on what you're trying to go to. Obviously, if you're trying to go to like, a sealed tournament, a lot of that is still luck dependent on what you're opening, right? Because like if you open up no bomb rares and no good uncommons somehow, just you open up all trash. There's a lot more skill involved in trying to win with that pool than if you like. I opened up 3 Okos.
Yep.
Like there is a big difference between those two pools.
Oh yeah, and kind of like the same idea goes like with the preparation of just kind of knowing going in and just kind of testing like your evaluation skills of like cards and archetypes and everything like that, and what you're looking for, and that's kind of its own beast and a whole nother thing that quite frankly I
Yeah,
don't know if even for this one RCQ I don't know if I really want to keep tackling, but it has been a lot of fun.
yeah. I need to start tackling that before next weekend.
Um, some quick things too, because I mean, I think we covered like a lot of like I would say like the fun stuff of like Magic is actually getting to play the game. There's some boring
Yeah,
stuff that like I kind of like to focus on a lot. Like usually like the week of leading up to the tournament, it's like just making sure that you get some good sleep, stay adequately hydrated. Hunger is like a big thing because I know when I'm hungry, I'm a lot dumber than I usually am. So I like to bring a good amount of like snacks and stuff to kind of eat, if there's not really a time for me to go and get like a full meal. Definitely having like granola bars, snack bars, something like that is a good idea.
yeah.
And still
Real,
drinking a ton of water too.
yeah. Real quick, energy drinks is not what we're talking about. We're talking about actual water. Just in case anyone's confused, water is what you want. You
True.
can drink the energy drink, you can drink the pop, but water will keep you actually hydrated. Drink the goddamn water.
I will say if you're like I would say if you're playing like in the top 8, like I will say that like caffeine, pop, energy drinks, whatever, I would say are acceptable like at the beginning before you play round 1, like whatever.
Yeah.
And then I would say like in top 8 or whatever, if you feel your brain kind of like lagging behind a little bit, you just need like kind of that quick jolt. I would say caffeine is acceptable. I do not recommend doing it anytime in the middle of it, you know, unless you absolutely just unless you absolutely need it. Try to avoid it. Just stick to water.
Yeah. I will say that, like, generally speaking, I usually, because I have to travel to every tournament I go to, because I don't get to play tournaments that are 5 minutes down the road from me. Um, I will usually have a monster or some kind of energy drink that I will drink on my way there and probably through like the first or second round. And then after that, I'll switch to water.
Yeah, I mean it's kind of a just kind of it's a good habit. It's a really good
And
habit to just drink water. Your body wants it. It craves it. Trust me, as tasty as that Red Bull is, and I am just like absolutely addicted to every single flavor. I'm like Tuco for Breaking Bad, like pink, blue, yellow, purple. Like I don't care. So, I mean, that's kind of like some good tips. And then Randy already kind of like went over some like after tournament stuff, take notes. Don't be afraid to discuss it. If you need to take a minute from, the tournament, if this is like especially brutal and you just need to like take a day, whatever, to kind of like step away from it, step away from it. And then when you're mentally ready, come back and review your notes and, try to recreate the scenarios as best you can to see if you can come up with something different.
yeah, I will say don't be afraid to talk to your opponent after the match. Um, be respectful. So especially if you are going to, if you've been gone to many tournaments or this is your first tournament, um, be if you win the match, be respectful on when you're talking to your opponent. So I know a lot of people don't want to talk about the loss they just got, so they might not want to talk to it. If they just are short with you or don't want to talk, like do not press that issue. Don't be that asshole who is trying to gather more information. Like, hey man, I know I just beat you, but I was thinking about this kind of line, and I actually had these 6 removal spells. I was trying to figure out which one I wanted to play. Like, do not be that dick essentially, because like you probably don't mean it. You don't mean to like sound like you're rubbing anything in or like being like, oh, I still had all these, but it can definitely come off that way to someone who just lost a match, especially if it was a close match or you guys are playing for like top 8 or playing for top 16 or whatever, like it can be hard for someone to then also want to go talk about that immediately after they just lost to the same person they just lost to.
Yeah, I mean it's definitely easy to kind of like read the room, even just straight up asking like, "Hey, can I get your advice? If not, like, could I
Yeah,
talk to you later, like sometime like in between rounds, whatever, just to kind of give them a little bit of time to like process it because even though it is, you know, a teenager's card game, like losing does suck. It still
yeah,
sucks.
yeah. Like I said, no one goes to a tournament that they spend money on happy they lost.
And you know, to be honest, I think there's only been I've definitely had for every person that's just like, you know, I don't care to like talk or whatever, regardless of they won or lost. Like I think there's probably at least a handful of people, if not more, that were kind of able to, you know, willing to talk through, for the most part, you know, certain things if I had like questions and things like that. So you know, you'll probably be unlucky and find someone who like just doesn't want to talk, like period. You know, like whatever, kick rocks. But I will say that if you end up going to like a pretty good store, you'll find a lot of players that are willing to kind of just like talk things out.
Yeah, but like we said, like read the room. Obviously, just like make an informed decision. Don't just like keep plowing through when it's very clear they're trying to walk away or not talk to you. Like, don't be a dick. Um, which I mean, that could be just probably rules for almost every single person. Don't be a dick.
Randy, I lost you for a second because
Did you?
I can't stop clicking on things. I was just trying to clean stuff up and like get things ready for when I edit this.
But yeah, just don't be a dick. Read the room. Read, kind of see what your opponent is feeling. But like, don't be afraid to ask them questions after the match. Um, when you go to a tournament, the judge will more than likely go over this. But um, I'm not saying that your opponent is trying to cheat you, but your opponent does not have your best interest at heart. If you have any questions, any rules concerns, anything at all that you are mildly unsure of, call a judge over. That's what they're there for. That's what they want to be there for. Just ask. Worst case scenario, you are right and it's not going to go the way you want it to. Best case scenario, both you and your opponent were completely wrong and now you know the correct way to proceed. So like do not be afraid to ask a judge whatever, no matter how dumb you think the question is or how irrelevant you think the question is or whatever, do not be afraid to call a judge and ask. It
Yeah,
costs you literally nothing, and it is the best way to not feel bad from going to a judge on round 4 and like, hey judge, my opponent did this on round 2. I didn't think that was right, so I've called you over, and the judge's gonna go, yeah, yeah, you should have, but it's now round 4 and I have no way to rectify that. So
yeah,
next time.
yeah. Um, oh shoot, I thought I. Oh, you know, I've definitely called judges just to like confirm things too, like where I'm very confident this is how it works and this is how like it's always happened. But you know, if it's in like a crucial part of a game, you know, just for me anyway, like I'll end up like double checking with the judge, like, hey, this works this way if I do, or like I'm going to do this, like this happens, correct? And I don't know if they're necessarily supposed to answer the question like in that way, but I have typically gotten an answer, you know, when I've basically laid out like if I do A, then B happens.
Yeah, there is some weird stuff with judging, and I'm not going to pretend to sit here and know how they can answer every question by any stretch of the imagination. But they will give you the answer they can, at least for the most part. They will answer it to the best of their ability because they obviously can't dictate how to have the game go. But like if you ask your if you ask the judge, hey, if I cast shrapnel blast on their 3/3, that's a vanilla 3/3, it's gonna die, right? More likely to just go, yeah, the creature would take 5 damage and through state based effects should die. Yes.
Hmm.
Is usually the answer you'll get is something kind of very technical to where they can't yeah, you should definitely kill the creature. But they will give you the best of their answer they can without trying to influence the game in any way, shape, or form.
Yeah, and you know, there's some pretty infamous like mishaps or whatever from like people like asking judges questions intentionally trying to mislead your opponent for ethical reasons. Don't do that.
Yeah.
I mean, like there's like a story. I'll be real quick. Where like back in the day, Dark Confidant was like a legal card, and like an opponent would have like an uncracked fetch land or something like that, and they'd be like, "Hey, if I play this Pithing Needle, like, can I name Dark Confidant like with this card?" And yes, you can. So a judge will tell you yes, and so you play it, and your opponent's like, "Yeah, it resolves," and then you name their fetch land. So then, like, they can't activate it, and you essentially stone rain them. But like you did so in a misleading way to like basically make that happen. So like I don't know if it's necessarily illegal. I don't think that that's something that you can get in trouble for, but it is pretty scummy, and I suggest like not doing it.
Yeah. Obviously that shouldn't happen in. Well, I guess Pithingo is legal, I think, in Pioneer, so it is possible to play Pithingo, but I don't think anyone's playing Pithingo in Pioneer currently.
I don't know. I definitely not
But
that, but like for like few like
no,
just as like
I
an example, like
no, I get that.
don't don't like ask a question in front of a judge like not to have like a genuine question, but just to be like I'm gonna ask it a certain way to like make my opponent think that I have something, and they're going to then like do everything they can to like kind of play around it, or think that they're okay, and then just be like, yeah, like I'm gonna do this, and it's like cool, like I'm gonna kill you because while you typically would have been able to stop me, I misled you into a certain way, so then now you're kind of cooked.
Yeah, exactly. Um, Also, going with the fact of like snacks, water, make sure you are stepping out for fresh air. Now, obviously, if you're going to time every round, perhaps learn to play a little bit faster so you can get some fresh air, um, use the restroom, things like that. But yeah, definitely make sure you're stepping outside of the store and getting that fresh air, or venue hall, or wherever you're playing at, and getting some fresh air, and you're walking around in between the rounds. Obviously, if you're going to time around, that's a lot harder to do, but you should have time in between each round to get up, walk around, make sure you're stretching your legs, keeping your blood flowing, things like that. Just very basic things that you don't think about, but you definitely should be doing.
Yeah. Oh shoot. I hate having ADHD because I always get like really good ideas, and I'm like, I'll wait, and I end up losing them.
I think that's kind of like most of the big ideas I have, or big, excuse me, talking points for like going to your first tournament or going to a tournament. Just kind of like some basic things, drink water, have snacks. If you can't bring snacks, hopefully the store has some kind of snacks available. Don't just be eating candy all day. Like that's not what you need. You don't need to be on a sugar rush the whole day. Um, get some fresh air. Walk, stretch your legs in between rounds as long as you can. Don't be afraid to call a judge. Like it's much better to call a judge and have a stupid question than it is to be that person in round four talking to the judge about how you should have called them in round two.
Very true, and you'll get the whole spiel from the judge anyway. And at least the Ohio
Yeah,
ones are pretty. The events in Ohio, I should say. I think some of them are like out of state, but they're usually pretty entertaining, and they do a fantastic job.
yeah. So, but the judges are there to help you. Your opponent is not necessarily there to mislead you, but they do not ever have they don't have your best intentions in mind. Like they are trying to win this game or match or whatever you want to say. So like it is not in their best interest to give you all the information or whatever. Don't be afraid to read your opponent's cards. Say, hey, can I read that? Like know what they're doing, know what the card does. If you have any questions about it, call a judge, read the card. Just don't just take anybody's word for it. I'm not saying your opponents are trying to cheat you by any means. I know I've done not done things where like sometimes I'll play cards. I used to be a big like um Chinese gamer where I have like all my cards in different languages and stuff like that. If you don't know what a card does and like your opponent has a card in a different language, just call a judge. Say, hey judge, I need the oracle text on this card. I don't know. I have no idea what this does. And they will pull up the oracle text from either was it the Gatherer, MTGO, the Gatherer, things like that. You'll have the exact wording for it.
I think the companion apps have like the have like the Oracle, like the updated text on like all the cards and stuff like that too. So I mean, I know that's
They
like a
do. I just don't know how. I don't know if you can use that in a tournament.
yeah, I mean, I don't know if I mean I don't know. It,
I, I,
I
I
guess
guess
up
I
to the
could.
judge, head judge's discretion.
Yeah, I guess also too. Like if you like, just call the judge over. Like I said, it is much better to look and like be temporarily embarrassed or ask a dumb question. Um, that's not going to matter next round than it is to be the person who didn't ask the question and lost the game because of it.
Yeah, you might even have a lot of other people like helping yell for the judge like with you, rather than just like, oh, look at this idiot calling a judge.
Yeah. So no one thinks that someone's an idiot for calling a judge. This is not like school when you ask the teacher a question and everyone's like, "Wow, look at that dumbass who doesn't know what 2 + 2 is."
Well, Randy, we just channeled some childhood trauma.
No, no, I never asked teachers questions. I was always the person silently judging the people asking questions. uh,
Well, I
but I
mean,
don't do
oh, go ahead.
I don't do that with people with judges because Magic is a complex game, and there's definitely been quite a few times where I've called a judge for something that seemed really simple, and then I had the judge get like especially in bigger tournaments like there's multiple judges at like RCs and like 20Ks things like that. I've definitely had what I thought was a simple call that required a judge, and then the judge to call a secondary judge like, hey. I need to confer with you on this because, like, I think I know it's right, but I want a second person's opinion. And I'm like, oh, you feel so big brain when you're like, oh, the judge needed the judge. That makes me feel like, oh, this is a good call.
Yeah, I mean, it's it's easy. It's easy when like playing the game when at least for me, like at times I'm like I have a pretty good grasp on the game. I kind of know what's going on, and then sometimes you just make the absolutely just like dumbest decisions, like just typically you wouldn't make, but then it's like, of course, the time where you don't want to make that mistake, you're going to just because you're thinking about a million and one different things. So, I mean,
Mhm.
calling a judge, taking a minute to like slow down, like relax, actually kind of think things through instead of latching onto the first good idea or what you think is the first good idea, and then just yeehaw cowabunga.
Yeah, I will say, do not be afraid to take your time to think through your plays. Obviously, don't take 5 minutes to figure out if you should play the land or not. You know, play at a reasonable pace, but like, do not be afraid to use the clock. Like, you have 50 minutes for 3 games. Like, if you use all 50 minutes for all 3 games, no one's gonna be upset. You know,
It's well, when you go 15 minutes over time on round, people are gonna be upset.
Yeah, but I'm usually upset at those people because it's the people who are looking at one card in hand while they have Termagoy versus the opponent with no cards in hand, and they have a land in their hand, and they take 15 minutes to realize they should play the land. Those are the people I'm upset with.
Boomer.
Yeah.
But I think I mean I don't have anything else to really add. At least like I think
Not,
that's a pretty good like starting spot for a lot of,
yeah.
I mean a lot of players, even like good advice for people that have been going to tournaments, that just small little mental incremental things to kind of improve your play.
Yeah. I guess the only thing I will say, this is more for players who go to a lot of tournaments or who have been playing probably a little bit now. Don't be afraid to have a sideboard guide. It is very good to have. Um, the best thing I can say about it is it's just one less thing you have to think about during a long tournament. So like when I went to RC Denver, I had a sideboard guide for my Rhinos list. I've been playing Rhinos for 3-4 years at that time now. Um, and I had a sideboard guide just because it was one less thing I had to think of for like, I knew this was going to be a 9-10 round tournament. If that's one less thing I'm thinking about for 9 rounds, 10 rounds, it's that much more brain power I'm now adding to my matches, or I'm adding to a critical thinking point in time, or things like that. So I will say that that is something that you should look into going over, especially when you get to bigger tournaments and things. When you're doing these RCQs that are like, 5 rounds, 4 rounds, cut to top eight, it's not nearly as important as when you go to like an RC or 20K when you know it's going to be a lot of rounds if you're going and you're obviously you're playing on doing well, but if you do end up doing well and you're playing all these rounds, that is something useful to have.
Yeah, I mean, 1000%. I definitely like having sideboard guides with me when I go and play tournaments. It just one less thing, and sideboarding, like you save so much time, like if you're
Mhm.
sideboarding.
But yeah, I mean that's not really for like these RCQs that you're going to be going to. You shouldn't be going to like a 12 round RCQ
That's true.
unless you're in Denver.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, hey, I've taken sideboard guides to like 6 round tournaments. I mean, oh, it just feels a lot better where like that's like the one less thing you got to worry about.
Oh, for sure. Like I said, it's just one of those like this is another thing I don't have to worry about now.
Yeah. All right. Do you have anything else you want to add, Randy?
I don't think so. That was the last little piece I had.
All right. Let's struggle to get through the end of this now. And I'm leaving all this in, by the way, because I just gotta hype myself up here a little bit. But yeah, I think that's it for episode 9 of the Casual Spikes podcast. Hopefully you get some good information out here. You've kind of learned how to tackle the Pioneer metagame as we get into the Pioneer RCQ season and look towards hopefully qualifying. I mean, I know me and Randy are gonna try to kind of, for the most part, get after it to try to qualify for DC and maybe have some cool like podcast type stuff. At the event, that'd be pretty sweet. Honestly, that'd be really cool.
Yeah, it'd be something interesting to do. I'd love to have you there in RC and have some actual friends in RC.
I just have to hope that like I don't play like absolute like dog shit. That'd be
Oh,
amazing.
no, man, you're gonna open up 3 Okos. It's fine.
Yeah. Just have like the nuttiest of like sealed pools ever to, and then go 0-2. See, so real quick, I'll say it's a bad omen if I do open up an Oko because I've played plenty of like Throne of Eldraine like limited back in the
Mhm.
day, and I've probably beaten more Okos than I have lost to Okos. So I think if I open them up, it'll just be bad luck. Like
Fair
I
enough.
physically cannot play with them because it'll just give me bad luck.
We'll just trade them to me. That's how that works, right?
We have a muscle sliver situation. I swear I had 4 in my pool. Okay, well, take us to the trash can you threw it away in to replace it, and then we'll let you have it. Yeah, I left it out in my car. I'll be right back, and then never come back.
Uh,
Anyway, episode 9, Casual Spikes podcast. Hopefully you found all this information helpful and whatnot. And if you did, or even if you didn't, whatever, if you were even slightly entertained about what's going on here, consider subscribing to not only my channel, where you're going to get a lot of modern and pioneer content, but you can subscribe to Randy's channel as well, because believe it or not, he doesn't only just do modern now, he does pioneer, and he's putting out multiple videos a week. I put out multiple videos a week, so you're able to kind of get your fill of both those formats, and get pretty in tune with some different decks. I know me and him unintentionally end up coming up with like some of the different decks and things like that, so there's kind of a good variety between the both of our channels.
yeah, unless you look at like 4 days ago, probably when this comes out, where we both released an arc like Phoenix
Ah,
tech on the same day. It's just like, great minds.
you know what? I'm pretty sure my neighbor has a video on Arclight Phoenix, so like I'm not counting that.
That's fair.
And that's like a 60-year-old woman, so but if you want more content, you like the podcast or maybe you like one of us individually, whatever, don't be afraid to subscribe to either of our channels and ring notification bell, of course. Support us kind of in this magic journey. And next weekend, I guess, will be the official start to kind of the RCQ season. We're going to be preparing for Outlaws of Thunder Junction Limited, and then if one of us or both of us ends up qualifying, well, then y'all are on your own. More than likely, we'll be in the same boat, and we'll be kind of going over some more tips, tricks, things like that to kind of tackle like the Pioneer RCQ season. So
Yeah.
yeah, I think it's gonna do it for me. I'm Dakota. That's Randy, and hope to see you all, on our channels and the next episode, which will be episode 10. That I'll need to confirm about 5 times is actually episode 10. So We'll see y'all later. Have a good night, morning, afternoon, whenever you're watching this. See y'all later.